Hi, my name is Vanessa Banks, and this is my story. Maybe you've known me my whole life. Maybe you knew me just for a season. Maybe you think you know me, and maybe you don't. But I really just want to share my story and be honest, and I hope that it might inspire someone or that someone will connect with something that I've said and it'll help them in their own life. Or maybe you just need to hear something today. I don't know. But I just really felt like I wanted to share my full story of military to missionary and see what happens. And I encourage you to share your story too, because everyone has a story, and everyone's story is amazing. So I'm going to start by sharing with my high school experience and an event that really changed my life in high school. I was invited to go to a retreat at a church in Ottawa when I was in grade 10. And it was just a weekend retreat for youth. I had no idea what to expect, and I still don't know why I decided to go, but I just did. And the weekend completely changed my life. I can't explain how I knew, but I felt like I needed to learn how to play guitar. And so I bought a guitar a week later, and I taught myself how to play, and I started singing. And now music is one of my biggest passions, and it's one of the things that I do most now as a missionary in El Salvador. And so that was one way it changed my life. I also met so many amazing people that weekend. Some people that are my best friends to this day. Some people that have been so influential in my life and in who I am today. That weekend I also met a man named Alan Day. Some of you know him, some of you don't. And Alan is just such an incredible person, and he eventually, many years later, led me to El Salvador for the first time. But anyways, that weekend just completely changed my life. When I was 16, I joined the military. And so it was when I was still in high school, and it was only part-time. But my entire family is military, and so there was definitely a strong family influence. And so I was in the part-time military while I was still in high school, and then I switched over to full-time. So I went to Royal Military College and then did a couple more years of training. And I was in the Army, so I was training to be an armored officer, which is basically learning how to command armored vehicles and tanks. And I honestly just fell in love with the Army from the very first day I entered. And I know a lot of my military friends can attest to this. The Army is just a very dark place, and there's a lot of people that are depressed, and there's a lot of bitterness, and there's a lot of people that are hurting, and I just was drawn to it. I was so passionate about the adventure of the Army, just living a life of adventure and mission and purpose, and I just really fell in love with the people, and I felt like that was my purpose in life, was to be a light in the darkness. And I will admit that I went through seasons where my light was very dim, and seasons where, I didn't feel like I was really making an impact or really positively affecting anyone's life. But overall, I just really tried to be there for people and just build strong relationships with people and just show them that they weren't alone and just try and give a little bit of hope into the darkness. And although my entire family's military, they're all Air Force, so I was the first one to join the Army, and I just felt like there was so much purpose in my season in the Army. In total, I was in the Army for about 7.5 years, and I know that overall I did make a difference, and that I did make an impact in many people's lives. And I know that there was a real big reason for that and a purpose in that time. And honestly, at that time, I thought that I would be in the military for my whole life. I thought, this is it. I can make a difference here. I can make an impact. I can be a light. And also with my whole family, that was everyone's life path. So I just felt like this is it. This is my life purpose. This is my calling, is to be in the Army and be a woman in the Army. And just try and be myself and be a light. So that's kind of how I entered the Army, and I was so passionate about it, and the training, I loved it. It really fed into my adventurous side and just who I am as a thrill seeker, and yeah, and I learned so much being in the Army. And there were so many things that I learned over the years and experiences that I struggled with and I came through and learned. And so I'm just going to share a little bit about some of the main things that I learned during my time in the Army. So my first big thing that I learned was that it's a very hard place. There's so many challenges that you face, both physically and mentally, and especially in your training. And the training is very difficult. It's a long time period, and it's basically you just go through so much physically and mentally, and you feel like you're at your breaking point. And there were many times where, honestly, I just wanted to give up, and I didn't think I could keep going. And the only thing that got me through was realizing that I didn't have enough strength in myself to get through those challenges. And so I needed to trust in God. And once I realized that, I can't do this on my own, but if I trust in God and use His strength, He will give me the strength to get through every single challenge and every single obstacle. And I think that's something important for us to realize, is that when we find, our purpose in life, and when we're in a place where we feel like we're meant to be there, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. You are going to encounter so many challenges in your life and so many obstacles. And you just can't give up. You just have to keep going and trust that if you're meant to be there, the path is going to clear and you're going to make it. And so I learned early on that when I looked to God's strength, I could get through anything. And I was able to accomplish far more than I ever thought was possible. And so my favorite Bible verse became Philippians 4:13, which is, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And I honestly would not have gotten through all those challenges if it wasn't for my faith. And so I learned basically early on that whenever you come up to a challenge, if you trust God, He's going to get you through it. And whether that was my hard physical training or the mental game or just dealing with life or even, climbing Mount Kenya in Africa, it was all about my trust in God and God's strength, using God's strength and not my own. So that was one of the main things that I learned. Another big thing that I learned was about my identity. And I learned early on that many people in the military see that as their identity. They completely identify with the military character and the Army character, and they think that that's who they are. And in many cases it is who they are. That's where they find their identity. It's their whole world. And I went through many seasons where I struggled with that. And it's obvious when you go home for vacation and all you want to talk about is military. And you're not in your uniform, but you just dressed like, it's kind of obvious that you're in the military. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, because, I know lots of people that really, that is who they are, and they love the military and they have the right personality for it, and it's just who they see themselves in their life. But for me, it never really fully fit with my personality. And I started to come to the point, especially when I would travel back between Royal Military College and back to Ottawa, and I would go to my church in Ottawa, the same one that I went to that retreat at so many years ago. And I would go to the youth group, and it just reminded me of who I really was, and I realized that, even though I was in the military and that was my job, it didn't define who I was, and it didn't change my personality. And it never changed who I was fundamentally. Because I realized that my identity is not found in my job or where I live or my family. My identity is found in Christ. And that's the same for all of us. We are children of God. And so it doesn't matter what our life circumstances are or what our job is. We are children of God. And we are beautiful and we are loved, and we are free. And that is something that can never be taken away from us, no matter what. And so I've started to realize that the military was just a temporary thing. And I'm the same person, whether I'm in the military or whether I'm a missionary in El Salvador. And so when I left the military, I realized that it didn't change who I was. And sure, the military made me a stronger person. It helped shape how I deal with things and dealing with stress. It helped make me into a good leader. So many things I learned from the military, and it gave me my story. And it is a part of who I am today. But it didn't change who I really was at my core. And so many people, when they leave the military, they struggle with that. They struggle with how to not be military and how to be a civilian and how to fit back into society. And I never struggled with that because it wasn't part of my identity. And so I didn't have to rediscover who I was, because I already knew who I was. And that was something that came with many years of, struggling and trying to find out who I was. But I finally realized, and once I knew who I was, the surrounding circumstances didn't matter. And so I was able to leave the military, never had any identity crisis, nothing, the transition into civilian life was exciting and new, and it wasn't an adjustment at all, because the military wasn't who I was. And I think that's important for all of us to realize, is that, it doesn't matter what job you have or where you live or your family. Those things don't have to define you, because apart from all of that, you are a child of God, and you are loved, you are beautiful, you are amazing, and you are unique. And if you were to leave your job tomorrow, you would still be amazing and unique and loved and beautiful. And so that's another thing that I really learned in the military, was about my identity and just who I really am. A third thing that I learned, and this is something I share a lot about in El Salvador and specifically with women, is just about identity as a woman. And basically, being a woman in the military and in the combat arms is very difficult. And often I was the only girl, or one of the only girls. And it's a very specific environment, and it's very intense. And I went through a lot of struggles of knowing that I was meant to be there, but just feeling like I just didn't fit in, and I just didn't have the right personality, because I am very gentle and kind and not not someone that people would think of when they think of a tank commander. And so many times over the years, I felt like I had to change who I was in order to be successful in the training and to be considered a good leader and all sorts of things like that. And then I started to realize that, I did feel like I was there for a purpose, and my purpose was as a woman. And God called me there as a woman, and He didn't want me to change who I was. He wanted me to just be myself. And so I started to be myself, and I learned that women make really great leaders, and sometimes we do things in different ways. Sometimes we might do something slower than a guy might do if it's like a physical challenge and things like that. And we are different, and men and women have amazing qualities and different qualities, but that doesn't mean that they can't both be amazing leaders. And so that was something I learned, just about, the fact that women can do anything that men can do. Just sometimes we do it in different ways, and we just have different personality traits and qualities to offer. And honestly, when I just was myself, sometimes people questioned my decisions and what I did or why, but a lot of people told me to my face that they would follow me. And actually, a lot of my staff, some sergeants and warrants who had been in the military for, 20, 30 years, and they've actually been to war, a lot of them told me, I will follow you into war. You are a great leader. And I think one of the main reasons about that is that women are very caring and motherly, and we just care about people. And so that's one of the most important things about being a leader, is caring about your subordinates and making sure that they're okay and that their needs are met and that they're heard, and just leading by example. And so I learned that women do make amazing leaders. And that is one thing that I feel like is on my heart to share with young women, mostly in El Salvador, because that's where I am, but really any women that I'm able to speak to, I just try and speak to them about that and show them that, they have amazing qualities and qualities that make them great leaders. And also that, they can dream. They can have dreams and ambitions, and just not let anyone tell them that they can't do something because they're a woman. And I just tell them that, they have a special purpose in life, and their purpose is whatever their purpose is, they're called to it as a woman, and that is an amazing thing. And so that's something that I really try to share as well when I share my testimony and when I share what I learned in the military. And honestly, I'm not trying to be ungrateful, and I'm not anti-military, because I was in the military, and it's such a huge part of my life because my entire family is military. And honestly, I am very grateful for my time in the military. And there were definitely hard moments, and the end was not the best, but I am very grateful because it taught me so many things, and it made me the person that I am today. And I will always have that. I learned so much about dealing with stress, about working with people and loving people, about being a leader. And I think the most important thing of all is that my time in the military gave me my story. And that is something that I do a lot now, is I share my story about being military, about being a woman in the military, in the combat arms. And really, it just prepared me. My time in the military prepared me to be a missionary. And so I see it now as preparation. It did shape the person that I am today, and it gave me my story to share. So I'm very grateful for my time in the military and that opportunity and that part of my life. It's a chapter of my life that does give me the story of who I am. So I'm very grateful. So that's kind of just a little glimpse of what I learned in the military. I know that it was a crazy time, but I did have many amazing moments, and I know that, I'm not perfect. I'm human. But I know that overall I did make an impact in people's lives. Maybe not everybody, maybe some people saw me during some of my dark seasons, but I know that at the end of the day, I was able to just offer a little bit of light into what is a lot of darkness. And the military is a very noble calling, and I really admire the people that are in the military for their whole career. It just wasn't for me. But so anyways, you might be wondering now, how did I get to where I am today? I'm a missionary in El Salvador. So that in itself is something that might have come to a surprise to some people. Maybe you were just like, what? You saw something on Facebook or just didn't see it coming. And maybe it seemed like just a random event, a sudden thing, but it really wasn't. It took many years for me to fully realize it and just realize what I was meant to do and where my heart is and where my passion is. And it was not an easy decision either to leave the military. So basically, when I was, so I went to Royal Military College, and in 2012, so it was between second and third year of RMC. And at that point I was fully super excited about the military, super passionate, thought this is it, this is my life purpose. And then I had just finished my, first I'll say, so actually in 2011, so back to Alan Day, who I was talking about earlier. So he went to my church in Ottawa, and I knew that he was starting to lead teams to different countries on mission trips with Youth for Christ Canada. And I didn't really know a whole lot about it, but, I'm a very adventurous person and I love traveling. And so he started asking me if I would join him on the trip, because he's like, I'm going to El Salvador. and I really want you on my team. I think you have a great story to tell, and you have your music now, your guitar. You could bring your guitar and you could sing everywhere, and I just really want you on the team. And he just kept being persistent and kept bugging me, and he just wouldn't give up. And it's not that I was against it, just, but I was like, yeah, sure, like if it works out with my time off, I only get like 3 weeks off every summer because of my military training, so sure, if it works out, then sure, I'll go, why not? I love traveling, love adventure, always wanted to go on a mission trip, but I honestly didn't even really know what they did on mission trips, and I'm sure a lot of you have no idea. But so anyways, he invited me in 2011, and I actually couldn't go because of my military training that summer. So then in 2012, he's like, so we're going back. Can you please be on the team? I want you on the team. And so it just happened to work out that summer that I was able to go. Sorry. So anyways, I had just finished my intense Army training. So for those of you in the military, it's CAP or BMOQ land. And it was literally the hardest physical challenge I've ever done of like training, military training. It was just insane. Physically, mentally, everything. So I did the training, and then I did a week at camp, and then went right away to El Salvador. So I was actually pretty burned out. I was exhausted, just super, super burned out. And I even remember I didn't even know like where El Salvador was on a map. And some of you probably don't know, and that's okay. Don't feel silly if you ask me. Basically, El Salvador is in Central America, near Guatemala and Honduras, and it's just south of Mexico. But anyways, I had no idea what to expect, didn't know where El Salvador was on a map, didn't even know what language they speak, which they speak Spanish, by the way, and El Salvador actually means the savior in Spanish, so fun fact. But, yeah, I'm pretty sure I didn't even look up until the day before the trip. I already had everything booked, the flight booked, everything, and then I was like, oh, I should probably look up where I'm going tomorrow, where I'm flying, because I don't know. And so I looked it up and I was like, oh, okay, that's where it is, cool. And I went, and honestly, I was just not prepared for that because it completely changed my life. And this is something that people always ask me, like, how did you know that was where you were meant to be? And it's hard for me to explain because it was just this feeling from when I got there. I just knew that I was home. And I'd never been there before. And it's a completely different culture, a different language. But from practically the moment that I stepped off the plane in El Salvador, I just knew, this is it. This is my home. And I can't explain it. But my heart just stayed there. And it's been there since 2012. And my heart has never come back to Canada since that moment in 2012. And I remember I had my guitar, and I brought my guitar everywhere, and I was singing just in English at that point. But I just saw such an impact being made through music. And then I would share my story of my time in the military and, about being a woman in the military. And I just saw the power in my words and that I was making a difference and that I was inspiring people. And we visited a bunch of schools and just spoke in the classes. And I remember our first day, we spoke in like 9 different classes, and everyone else was just exhausted. And I just remember being so energized. And I just knew, I was like, this is what I was put on this earth to do. Because I'm here, and my full purpose is just to love people. And just to be a light, and share my music, and share what God has done in my life, and how my life is forever changed because of God and Jesus. And yeah, I can't even explain it, but it was just this joy that I have never experienced before in any other thing in my life. And some people question, about my passion, because I'm a very passionate person. I get passionate and I get excited about things. And I was very passionate about the Army. And so people were confused because they're like, well, but you were passionate about the Army and now you say you're passionate about El Salvador and missions work. So like, well, it doesn't make sense. But honestly, I thought I was passionate about the Army. But when I went that first year to El Salvador and did missions work and just loved people and shared my story and my music, it was a passion and a joy that I have never experienced before in my life. It was the passion that I had for the Army and the military was nothing compared to the passion that I have for El Salvador and missions. And so just seeing them kind of side by side, the magnitude, it just doesn't compare. And so that's how I knew from that very first trip that that was my life calling. And that's what I'm meant to do. And that's what I was put on this earth to do. And I started to realize that my military, it was a calling. I was there for a purpose, but I see it as like a preliminary calling. It was basically like preparation for what was to come. And it's, you know, it's what gave me my story. It's what prepared me to be a missionary. And so I see it as preparation. And there was a purpose in it, but that was not my life calling. And so I knew in that first trip, I knew I had found it. I knew that God was calling me to be a missionary in El Salvador one day, but I also knew that it wasn't the right timing, because that happens a lot when God calls us to something. It's not the right timing yet. He likes to reveal little promises to us and little hints of what's to come, but we're not ready yet. You know, he needs to prepare us for that calling. He needs to make us worthy of that calling. He needs to make us grow stronger and be ready for that calling. And so I knew in that moment that God was still fulfilling in my life my military calling, and he wasn't done with me there yet. And so I knew it wasn't the right time yet, but I knew that it was coming. And so I went back to RMC, and everything had changed for me. Like, I still had some great times, you know, learned a lot, but my heart from that first moment was always in El Salvador, and it was like there was always a part of me missing. And suddenly, you know, just being a student and being in the military just didn't seem meaningful to me anymore. Because I just started to realize that it wasn't what I was meant to do for my whole life. And so I was able to go back to El Salvador the next 3 summers on short-term trips. So each trip was only 2 weeks, but 2 weeks is enough to change lives. And so every year, that calling that I knew in my heart was just confirmed and strengthened. And it just grew stronger and stronger every year. And every year it got harder and harder to leave El Salvador and go back to the military until it was unbearable. Like, I literally couldn't live with it anymore. I was like, I know where I need to be, and it's not here. It's not in Canada. It's not in the military. I need to be in El Salvador. And so finally, there was one year where I left El Salvador, and the next day I started my most intense military training course yet. And so that was learning how to be a troop leader of armored vehicles. So learning how to command 8 different armored vehicles at once. It was insane. It was the hardest thing mentally I've ever done. And it was just so crystal clear to me that it was not what I meant to do. It did not fit with my personality. And I was honestly miserable. But I knew I had to finish it out in case that was God's plan for me. So I finished it out to the end, and that started a really crazy year for me of just having no idea what I was supposed to do. Because here's where my story gets complicated. And, you know, some of you might not understand the decision that I made. And some of you probably think it's stupid. Some of you maybe think I cheated the system or whatever. But basically, when I went to Royal Military College, they paid for my university degree. And so I owed 5 years of service afterwards in the military. And at this point, when I was struggling with this and just knowing, like, I need to be in El Salvador, at that point, I had only served less than a year of my contract, maybe like 6 months. So I still had about 4.5 years to go in my contract. And so I was like, there's no way I can leave now. Because if you break your contract, you basically have to pay everything back of your schooling, your university degree, and training and other things. So basically, you can break your contract, but you owe a lot of money. And I just didn't think it was possible. I was like, I can't leave now because I'm gonna owe so much money. And that's just not possible. Like, you can't be a missionary and be in that much debt. And so I struggled with it, even though I knew it was time, but I couldn't. I thought it was impossible. So I was like, no, it can't be time. I'm stuck. And so it was a very hard year for me because I felt like I was stuck in the military, but it was not where I was meant to be anymore. And I see now that over the years, God slowly replaced my passion for the army and my calling with this bigger calling and this bigger passion for El Salvador. And actually in 2012, when I first went to El Salvador, and I knew about being a missionary someday, I knew it was coming, but I also, at that point, was still in love with the army. And I thought, I'm not, like, how am I ever going to leave? Like, I know that this is coming, and it's going to be better for me, but I love the army too much. Like, how am I ever going to be able to say goodbye and leave this life behind? But over the years, God slowly diminished my love for the army and replaced it with a bigger love for El Salvador. And so the day that I actually walked out the door, I had no love left for the army. And it was the easiest decision I've ever made, to walk out that door, my final day, never look back. But that was all part of the process, So anyways, back to my really hard year of waiting in the military. I was going through, all this stuff with I was like, okay, I know I'm not meant to be armored and work with the tanks, so I must, because I can't leave right now, so it must be that I'm supposed to do another job in the military for another few years and then go to El Salvador. But I basically went into a period of limbo, of having no idea how much longer I was going to be there, not knowing where I was supposed to go, and just waiting and waiting and waiting. And so I waited for about 8 months, and every few months I would have like an interview to change my job, and every time I would go in and it was like the door was shut. And I struggled a lot with free will, because I was like, I want to follow what God wants for me, but I still am the one that has to go in and make the choice of where to go. And what if I make the wrong choice? And someone at my church out in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Cross Point, someone told me, if you're trying to honor God's will and you make a wrong choice, he's just going to close the door and gently direct you in the right path. And so that just kept happening to me. I just kept trying to choose, and the door would be closed, and I would be like, what? What am I supposed to do? And I was praying so hard about every job within the military, and I just got nothing. Nope, not an ounce of passion or calling or direction, just nothing. I was hearing nothing from God, and I was so frustrated, and I just had no idea what I was supposed to do or how much longer I was going to be there. And now when I look back, I see that God used that time to get me more close with the church out in Fredericton, Cross Point, because I was only supposed to be in Fredericton for 6 months, and I ended up being there for almost 2 years, and I know now why, and it was because of Cross Point. But so anyways, I was just so frustrated. I kept getting all these doors shut that shouldn't have been shut, because for my peers, they weren't encountering any of these closed doors, and they were moving on with their training and their new jobs, and I was just stuck. Then finally, I went in for my last interview, and once again, door shut, and I was just so upset. I was crying. The guy who was interviewing me told me that I had to go back, and I had 1 week to decide what I was going to do, and then I had to pick new trades within the military. And I told him, I was like, there's nothing left. There's nothing else that I want. You don't understand. This is my last chance, and there's nothing. What am I supposed to do? And he was like, I don't know, figure it out. Go back, pick new jobs in a week, and that's it. And so I went back to my room, and I remember just feeling crushed. And I was crying, and I was praying, and I was like, what do you want from me, God? What am I supposed to do? There's nothing left. And in that moment, the light bulb went off, and I wonder if it's time. What if it's actually time to leave the military altogether and go to El Salvador, because I had known at that point for about 4 years. I knew that it was coming, but I didn't think it was yet. But then when I hit all of those roadblocks and closed doors, that's when I finally realized it was time. And I went to Cross Point, my church, that night, and we had like a prayer night, and I was talking to people, and I was like, what if I owe so much money to the military if I leave now? Like, what if I owe like hundreds of thousands of dollars? You know, like what am I supposed to do? And they all told me, they were like, if God is really calling you to this, he's going to provide. He's going to take care of that money, you don't have to worry. And then I felt there was another guy at Cross Point, his name's Pierre. Many people know him. I was praying with him that night, and I was like, I'm just struggling with the timing, because basically it's either I leave the military now and go to El Salvador and owe so much money, or I just wait another 4 years and then I don't know anything and I go to El Salvador. So it's not a matter, I know already that I'm called to be a missionary in El Salvador. So it's not a matter of that. It's a matter of when. Is it now or is it in 4 years? And like, I just need to know the timing. And he looked at me and he said, if God wants you to wait another 4 years, do you really think he would be putting it that heavy on your heart now? And that was a moment where I just knew. I was like, the timing is now. It's to the point where I can't live with this anymore. It's too big to live with. It's a burden. It's unbearable. It's time to leave the military. And I felt like that night that God wanted me to say yes to him, to take this crazy leap of faith, the hardest, craziest decision of my life, and to leave the military and step out into the unknown and move to El Salvador as a missionary. And I felt like God wanted me to say yes before I knew how much I would owe, or worry, all those things of this world that, we worry about, money and security and everything. I felt like God wanted me to say yes before I even knew that everything would be okay, and just trust him because he is good, and trust him that everything would be okay. And so I said yes to God that night. 2 days later, I had a meeting with the finance people in the military. So that includes the pension people. And I found out that I would get a pension for my time that I served in the military. And then I had a meeting with the debt people to get an estimation of how much I would owe. And the amount that I would get in my pension completely covered the debt of what I would owe. And so that was when I really knew it's time. And some people will hear that part of my story and think, she's crazy. Like, yeah, I can walk away at this point debt-free from the military. But I gave up my entire pension, and it would have grown substantially in another 4 years. And I sacrificed a lot of money. I'm not going to give a number here. If you want to know, you can ask me in person. But I sacrificed a lot of money. And yet, I knew it was time. I knew this was it. I knew that was a way that God was providing for me. And from that point on, I made the decision to leave my secure job in the military and move to a completely different country as a missionary. And as a missionary, some of you may know this, some of you may not, you have to fundraise your entire budget and living expenses. So I literally completely trust God now for even just to eat, to get money for food and living and also all the things that I want to do in El Salvador to help people. I have to completely trust God that he's going to provide through other people. And that is what my life is now. But, it's such a joy because I trust God for everything. And he does provide. Like, not only did he provide the entire amount that I needed to leave the military, basically, when it was all said and done, I left like 3 years early out of my contract. And he provided that entire amount that I needed to leave. and he provided the entire amount that I needed for my first year in El Salvador. And now I'm in my fundraising season with my new increased budget, and he's providing. And I mean, I'm at this point, when the time this video is recorded, I'm at about 50%, I would say, give or take. And so I still need another 50%. But you know what? Like, God has provided in incredible ways and done way too much in my life for me to doubt him now. Like, it's just insane. I know he's going to provide. And, you know, maybe someone watching this will really connect with my story and will decide that they want to donate. And, you know, every bit helps. And, you know, maybe God's using you in this moment to help me to achieve this calling. So that's kind of where I got to the point of knowing that it was time to leave the military. So the next day, I put in my release, my memo, to say that I was going to release, and then I waited more. Because in the military, it's not like a different job where you give in your 2 weeks notice and then you leave. Military release can take up to 6 months. And at that point, I was so moved on, and I am not proud of how I acted during those 6 months, because I did not have any motivation anymore to be there. I definitely had an attitude problem. And that's just me being honest, because this story is all about being honest and vulnerable with you guys. Because I am not some superhuman. I am not perfect. I make mistakes. Sometimes I don't know. Anyways, I basically had to wait, not 6 months, I had to wait 9 months to be released. And honestly, I was treated very badly during those 9 months. I had no information about my release or when it was going to happen, so I was just praying every day that it would come. And I waited every second of every day for the papers to come in. I was told all different things about when I would be released. You know, at the 6-month mark, they said, guaranteed you'll be released because it has to take maximum 6 months. Then I was all ready to move. 2 days before that 6-month mark, they told me, well, we don't have the paperwork, so I guess you're not getting released in 2 days. And then from that point on, it was just waiting in agony every second of every day for an additional 3 months. It was honestly the darkest time of my life. I really honestly just reached the end of my rope mentally because I was so ready to move on, and I felt like I was trapped, and I felt like I was in prison, and I felt like they owned me, and I just could not be free. And I just was so ready to go to El Salvador, and I was stuck. And it was definitely a dark time of my life. And just when I would feel like I reached the end of my rope, something else would happen, or someone would misunderstand me or treat me poorly. And it was just really, really dark and really bad. But I know now, looking back, that time was so crucial for me getting in with Crosspoint out east, my church, and just with the people. And somewhere in that 9-month period, I went from feeling like a visitor to feeling like I was home at Crosspoint. And they were such a huge part of my missionary journey, and today, they're such huge supporters of me, and we have lots of plans in the future for sending teams to El Salvador to work with me, and just so many things, and the people there are just solid gold, just so incredible. And so I see now that final 9-month period, the reason why God had me still in the military had nothing to do with the military. It had to do with Crosspoint. And so that's something else that I want to share with you guys is, sometimes when we're going through seasons in our life, they don't make sense. And we wonder why, and we think we know what's best and what we want. But God has a better plan, and when we look back in hindsight, we see the purpose and how God was working. And some things, we'll never know why. Maybe not until we get to heaven. But we just have to trust that there's a better plan. And so finally, I walked out that door of the military on February 19th, 2016. Finally was released. And I see now that was also part of the way that God worked through that situation. because my final time in the military was just so terrible that it made it so easy to leave and so easy to move on. And, every day to this day, now it's been about a year and a few months since I got released, I still appreciate my freedom every day. And I appreciate my new life and just being a civilian and, not having to follow some of the military rules and everything. Like, I still appreciate my freedom so much. And like I said, I don't have a negative impression of the military. I mean, I'll share with some people some of my struggles and some of my stories. And, there was a lot of dark moments. But like I said, it's a very noble calling. And, the military has a really big purpose. And it is a huge part of my family. And I'm very grateful for my time in the military. So I don't want people to think that I'm anti-military, because I'm not. And I have lots of friends that are still in the military. And like I said, it made me who I am today. But I did go through really hard times, and I was treated poorly. And that's a fact. That's not making that up. And so that was part of how I dealt with leaving the military, was just, that door was completely closed for me. And I'm never going back. It's just not who I am anymore, and it just doesn't fit with me. And so, but I see now that was also how God prepared me to leave and to be okay with leaving. Because remember, I said that I didn't know how I would ever leave the military because I loved it too much. But God made it easy for me to leave. It prepared me for that day when I left, never looked back. Now I just share about my time in the military, and I share about my story. But I'm never going back. That wasn't God's plan for my whole life. So, anyways, then after that, I finally in July went to El Salvador as a full-time missionary. And so I've been living in El Salvador for the last 10 months. I just finished my first term in May, and now I'm just back in Canada for a couple months to fundraise, because like I said, that's my life now. So I need to fundraise all the funds to get back to El Salvador. But honestly, I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I have no regrets. I have absolutely no regrets of leaving the military when I did and sacrificing all that money. There's no regrets. I will admit I struggled a bit with the timing. Even after I made the decision, I wondered, it wasn't that, I knew that I made the right decision. And that's something that you can't explain sometimes, how something is meant to be. But it was just something I could just feel through my whole body, in my bones. I just knew. And I knew I made the right decision. But I still struggled with wondering why. Because I was like, why is the timing now? Why didn't God want me to wait another 4 years and get a whole bunch of money and be a missionary with a whole bunch of money? Think of how much I could help people with that money. But at the same time, when I went this past year, it was revealed to me why the timing was now. And I know now that I am meant to be in El Salvador now. And that's that. So I know that I wasn't supposed to wait another 4 years. And so now I'm actually taking over, for the time being, as the leader of Youth for Christ El Salvador. And so we do have a lot of volunteers that are Salvadorian, and some really amazing volunteers. But I am the only full-time worker there now, for the time being. Eventually I'll be able to, my dream is to hire more full-time Salvadorian workers and appoint a new national director of Youth for Christ El Salvador, and I have lots of dreams to grow the ministry there and to make it bigger and also strengthen it across Central America. And yeah, it's a huge role, and I'm only 25, and like I said, I'm not superhuman. Honestly, I do struggle sometimes with the responsibility of it, and it's scary. I'm gonna be honest, it's scary sometimes, but like I said, I know that I'm where I'm meant to be. I know I'm doing what I'm meant to be, what I'm meant to do. And that's what keeps me going. And I know that I just have to take it one day at a time And I just have to trust God, look for his direction, and I just have so many dreams for the future of El Salvador. And honestly, it's a very dangerous country, but it's so beautiful. The people are so beautiful, and the culture, and there's a lot of darkness there, a lot of fear. But I really try to, bring some hope to the people and just build really meaningful relationships and share my story and share my music and just try to, once again, be a light in the darkness. And I've seen God work in so many amazing ways in El Salvador, specifically in the youth, because that's what we try to reach out to as Youth for Christ. We try to reach the youth. But, honestly, it's only just the beginning. I just constantly see so much hope and potential for the future of El Salvador. It's where my heart is. It's where I'm meant to be. And I am always going to see the beauty and the good in the country, no matter what. And I just finished my first term as a missionary. So, and like I said, I'm not perfect. And sometimes I don't know what the next step is. We did hit some roadblocks this past year with the Youth for Christ ministry, but we just keep going. And I know that we're there for a purpose with the ministry. I know that I really believe in Youth for Christ. And I know that I'm meant to be there with Youth for Christ, because I didn't find Youth for Christ. Youth for Christ found me. And so I just know that this is what I'm supposed to do. So, I guess that's it. I'm sorry that it's so long. I just really wanted to just be honest and just share my story, because I've been through a long journey to get to where I am today, and I've sacrificed a lot. Some people might not agree with my decisions. Some people might think I'm crazy, but I just want you all to know that I am really, truly happy, and I have no regrets about my decisions in my life, and I really believe in what I'm doing, and I believe that we can make an impact in El Salvador. So basically, now I just invite you to share your story. Everybody has a story, and everybody's story is so amazing and so beautiful, and that's what inspired me to share my story. And I just hope that someone will be inspired. Just remember that you do have a special plan for your life, and I was fortunate that I found mine pretty early, but don't give up. You do have a special purpose, and it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Trust me, it's hard. It's very hard, but you have to just hold on to that promise and that plan, that purpose, and you will get there. You will get there. Trust me. So just don't give up. You have a special purpose in life, and it's something that only you can do. So just hold on to that. And yeah, the purpose of this is not for me to collect more donations or anything. I really honestly just wanted to share my story and just give people a chance to hear straight from me of what I went through and, how I got to where I am today. Honestly, I think I'm in El Salvador for long term. It has my heart. And I'm gonna just take it one year at a time, but I do think that I'm there for long term, possibly my whole life, so time will tell. But if you are someone that has connected with my story and would like to help me out and donate, I'm not gonna say no. Because that is really how I get back to El Salvador, especially in this new leadership position. It's gonna be, I need to fundraise all the money so I can get back there. So if you would like to, sponsor me monthly or make a one-time donation, I'll put a link in either on the video or in the information section, and feel free to email me if you have any questions, if you want to email me, a video of your story or whatever, or if you want to post it on Facebook. I really just want to get our stories out there, because like I said, everyone has a story, and everyone's story is beautiful and amazing, and I really want to hear them. Honestly, that's why I'm doing this, because it's a little challenge to anyone who feels like now it's their turn. Just be honest. Just share your story. No one's perfect. Everyone goes through struggles. But you just might inspire someone. You might change someone's life. So please take the challenge and share your story. And so, for those of you who made it to the end of the video, again, I apologize because it's so long. And it was pretty tiring filming it. But I just thank you for listening and for not giving up on it. And just thank you for listening. And now you know. And if you have any further questions, feel free to send me an email. If you want me to go into any more detail about any of the seasons of my life, then yeah, my email is always there. And I'll answer right away. So, yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned. One day, I'm writing a book called Military to Missionary. So one day, hopefully it'll be published, and you can read even more detail. But, yeah. And also, another thing, final thing. I do love sharing my story. And doesn't matter if it's, like a church or a religious group, or if it's a non-religious group, I can, I don't have to include faith in it, but I'm always looking for new opportunities to speak in front of people in groups and just share my story. And, obviously it's great to get more exposure and to give people an opportunity to donate, but it also it really does inspire people, and I really love inspiring people. And I know there's people that have way more amazing stories than me, and I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I do find that people really connect with things that I say, and I hope that someone will hear it and be motivated or inspired, or maybe it'll motivate them to take a big decision in their life. Because honestly, life is short. And it's too short to be stuck doing something where you're not happy, where you don't feel like you're really living. And I'm sure a lot of you have something in mind of something that you're passionate about and that you've always wanted to do, but maybe you were too scared. And I just really encourage you to just take the leap, because life really is short. We could be gone tomorrow. You never know when it's your time to go. And it's just too short to be unhappy. Just be happy. Just do what makes you happy. And yeah, I just pray that you guys will have the courage to follow your dreams and never not do something because it's too scary, or because it's unknown, or because you don't know how it's going to turn out. Everything will be okay. Trust me. So, that's it. I've talked long enough. Like I said, if anyone has any opportunities for me to speak in front of groups, feel free to reach out to me. I can schedule it with you. I'm open for all sorts of opportunities like that. And just thanks for listening. And I just want to leave you with one more Bible verse that just is coming to mind. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans for you, says the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. So keep holding on to that hope, because you do have an amazing future. Bye.